Buongiorno, Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I am so happy to have with me here today Melissa Deep, who is the CEO of Virtique and many, many other things that we're going to talk about today. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Fosca. I'm so happy to be here today. I know we had to reschedule a couple of times, but finally we did it.
We did. And I think this is often the case with two incredibly busy women like the two of us, but we're finally sitting down to talk about, first, I'd really just love to hear about your story. You are a U.S. expat like me. You're originally from New York State. You've been living in Italy even longer than I have. And you also kind of live in a less traditional place, I would say, for Americans in Tuscany compared to like Florence or maybe Lucca or other realities. But I guess what I'd like to start with today is, what's your story? How the heck did you come to Italy in the first place?
Well, I actually have to thank an ex-boyfriend on this one because I happened to be living in Moscow in the early 1990s. You know, there's always been this connection between the Russians and Forte dei Marmi. And for those of you who don't know about Forte dei Marmi, it's about an hour from Florence on the Tuscan coast, and it's a very nice little beach town. It's a very interesting story that this ex-boyfriend of mine decided to have an affair with some married woman whose husband always sent her to Forte dei Marmi during the summers. Then after I lived in Moscow for 5 years, I moved to London, where I reconnected with my ex, and he took me to Forte dei Marmi because that's where he had been going with this other woman.
To see his lover.
Exactly, to see his lover. There's a lot more complicated, very interesting stories regarding this. However, I fell in love with Forte dei Marmi. Despite the fact that we fell out of love, I continued to go there on vacation when I lived in London pretty much every summer. Then I did get married, and then I got divorced. And I was living in Switzerland at the time, and I was traveling between Zurich and Forte dei Marmi. And I just decided that that's where I wanted to start my new life. And I've been there ever since.
Okay. So this is juicy. I knew it would be juicy. Eventually, I knew that once I got you here, you know, and it would be interesting and juicy.
Well, I'm holding back a little bit on the juice.
I know you are.
That could be another podcast.
I know. Well, we can definitely do that. So what were you doing at the time in London? So how did you make it happen also like professionally?
Right. When I first lived in New York, and I was transferred to Moscow for work. I was working for a telecommunications company, and we were providing satellite service to mining companies, oil companies that were having joint ventures with Russia after communism.
Yeah.
So they were without communications, and our company, which was led by a guy named Kenneth Schaefer, who was my first boss. And if you know the song by REM, What's the Frequency, Kenneth?
I do.
It's actually about him being mistaken for Dan Rather, I think outside of Columbia University, when Dan Rather got beat up and they were saying, What's the frequency, Kenneth? Well, Kenneth was my first boss, and actually I have a lot of things to thank him for. I was his assistant. He was the president of a company that was providing satellite services between Russia and America, and he actually found Russian TV on a self-built satellite station on his rooftop apartment in Manhattan.
Get out.
Yes.
So you're part of like this very cool like part of history as well.
Well,
that's huge.
He's definitely a part of it. I was his assistant, so I guess that de facto makes me a part of it.
Working for this.
So I was working for this crazy group of Americans with obsession with Russian. Another one is a great friend of mine. Her name is Marina Albi, and she was Columbia University, and they started doing a program for Russian studies and showing Russian TV during the late 80s. And this transformed into a business for commercial purposes for providing satellite telecommunications. After working in New York for 2.5 years and traveling back and forth a few times to Russia, I transferred permanently to Moscow, and that was in 1994. And I remember the first day, it was early October, and it was snowing already. So welcome to Moscow, where you don't see the sun for 6 months if you go into the office early and leave at 3 o'clock. But summer is wonderful because you go into the nightclub, right, and you miss the night because by the time you come out at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's light again.
Wonderful.
So it was definitely a lot of contrast, very different from your standard American New York lifestyle, but full of a lot of high energy young people who wanted to work and party and make money and have fun.
Yeah, that was an interesting time to be there.
It was the time.
It was
to be
the
there.
time.
It was.
But then you were like, no, I want to. You were in London, and then
why I left Moscow was it started to get too capitalist. It started to also be a little bit more corrupt. It wasn't that nice place where you were contributing to the change in the society. It was the place where you almost had to be unethical in order to make a lot of money.
Yeah, which doesn't feel very good.
I really didn't want to go that route.
Yeah.
So the company I was with also moved me to London. And then I actually got a different job, which was for another telecommunications company, but we were building a electronic exchange, much like the stock market, but for trading of international voice minutes between large carriers like British Telecom, AT&T.
Right.
And that was very interesting. We took the company public. And then I got married. I moved to Switzerland. I thought I was on a track to have a kind of standard, normal life, marriage, children.
We always do, don't we?
We did, but that came to a halt abruptly. Again, another different podcast. From then, I just decided, okay, the places that I've been, the places that I've lived, where do I want to be? And that was Italy, and that was Forte dei Marmi.
And what year was this, more or less, Melissa?
This was in 2007.
Okay.
Yes.
So you make the move, and
maybe it was 2009. Yes, I think it was 2009.
And how do you do it? I mean, we're saying all this and it sounds like it's so easy. Yes, it was a different time, but you kind of just picked up and you were like, okay, I'm going to move to Italy. Well,
at that point, I had been working a lot. I was also married. I was driving around in a Bentley. I think I just packed a few things in my Bentley and drove down to Forte dei Marmi.
Wow.
Well, no, not true. We actually had bought a vacation house.
So you were already sort of living there.
I was already projecting to have a holiday home there.
Okay.
And it just turned out that, I packed my stuff and
You were like, that's it, I'm moving to Italy.
Exactly.
So you had already been living abroad for many, many years. But what was it about Italy? I mean, for those who haven't been, it's pretty hard to beat a place like Forte dei Marmi. It's super fancy. It's got beautiful beaches. It's very international. It's very well situated because it's within very easy reach of Florence, Lucca. It's just a very nice place to be. But what made you really fall in love with Italy?
Well, Italy or Forte dei Marmi?
Both.
Because really, Italy, I've only had primarily the Forte dei Marmi experience. Now with work, we'll talk about how I've actually expanded that, and I'm actually happy about expanding. I think the thing that really, it's the bicycle life. It's you arrive, you get on a bicycle. I'm from a small town. Forte dei Marmi is a small town. Yeah. And it's just the feeling of being independent, on your bike, riding along the beach. Look, I'm almost starting to cry. It's just a beautiful place to live.
It's a really nice quality of life. And so this is something you actively sought out and you made it happen. So
absolutely.
You made a summer home become your forever home. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of your experience, I think, a lot of that personal experience when we talk about your business, I think was so helpful to you then when you did set up your company here and when you did ultimately decide to move in the direction that you did move in. So, but now that it's been you've been living in Italy probably as long as
about 16 years.
So a little
now.
less than I have, but you've been in Europe and abroad for just about, probably longer, much
30 years now.
Yeah. So what's been the most challenging thing about making your life in Forte dei Marmi? And what's been maybe the most charmed, perhaps what you just said, the bicycle life or the beach?
Every day is kind of a challenge because, as you know, living in Italy is full of surprises and you don't know what's going to happen from day to day. I find it just more gratifying than challenging. My son is almost 16. Actually, no, he's 15. That's how I know I've been here for 16 years. I add 1 year onto his age.
Right.
The biggest challenge was getting my driver's license.
Oh my God, for me too.
It was the first test. I was devastated when I failed.
Oh, you failed too?
Of course.
But you failed the written or the road?
The written.
Oh, no. I passed the written, but I had this, well, it's a long story, but I had a real sexist as my examiner the first time.
Well, you weren't showing enough leg, Fosca.
Well, you know what the first question he asked me? He had my ID with him. And he said, the question he said to me, and I swear my driving instructor saw the smoke coming out of my ears. He's looking at my ID and he goes, Signora o signorina? And you know what I said to him? Dottoressa.
Exactly.
And that was the kiss of death.
And he failed
me on the road test.
Oh, that's worse.
He was mean. And then the second examiner I had was actually, he saw this is so Italian, he saw my last name. He was like, where's your family originally from? And I told him, and he was like, oh, I spent every summer of my childhood there. It's a beloved place to me. That's it. I could have been smoking crack, texting.
You would have passed.
Whatever, I would have passed.
Well, the first time I showed up for the road test, I got sent back because I was wearing flip-flops.
You went with flip-flops. Oh, you were in Forte dei Marmi, but still, that's so American of you, Melissa, after all those years in Italy.
I don't think they were flip-flops. They were sandals. They actually had a back, but he was like, no.
He was like, I don't like that.
Exactly.
They're very particular here about the driving test stuff.
The written, I failed, and I was devastated.
It's tricky.
I realized it was the first thing I think I'd ever failed in my life, the first test.
Yeah.
And I was destroyed. But the second time, I nailed it, and I had 18-year-olds who were asking me questions in the middle, like, Melissa. I'm like, stop asking me questions. I'm going to get kicked out.
I made friends with all the kids in my driving class, and I even recruited one to be my babysitter.
Great. It was a fun experience.
Fun.
And yeah, you get to meet a whole bunch of different people.
Honestly, it's the question I get most from my clients. My clients who then decide to move here and live here permanently. The driving thing is literally like the biggest deal for them. And so it's one of the things I have to give most advice on. And the advice I always give is spend the money in a driving school.
And study.
And get the app.
I just have to say that I think it's complete bullshit that people from England could automatically transfer their license. They drive on the other side of the road.
I have no idea. I also have between you and me, I have no idea how the hell 99% of the people here who drive, how they got their licenses.
Believe me, on the way here, we had a couple of incidences.
Oh, yeah, honey. Every day of my life. Every day of my life. But, whatever. It's one of those things that you get used to.
It's the turn signal that's the biggest problem. Nobody seems to want to use it.
And people get confused at roundabouts. Boy, do people get confused at roundabouts. Anyway, but beyond that, right, I think, looking at you, you're very similar to me in a lot of ways. We've been here for around the same amount of time. We both have kids around the same age. We both grew up in the same part of, the United States. And, for me, when I look at someone like you and I think about you, I'm like, I feel like Melissa can do it all. Because I feel like when you've been living in Italy for as long as we have, and when you've done as much as we have, and I'm talking across the board, whether it be the driver's license, raising kids, starting your business, which we'll get to in a sec, but even just like the daily cultural stuff, there's just stuff that you don't understand until you live here.
And let me tell you, the Russia experience prepared me for anything.
Everything, yeah.
For everything. And so after that, after driving in Moscow and, having to learn Cyrillic to just get your bread, makes everything so much easier after.
Yeah. And do you think that your home, is Forte dei Marmi forever?
For now. Forever for now. I think so. I think so.
Well, I mean, as I said, I can think of very few places that aren't, as delightful as Forte dei Marmi. So it's a good idea, but you hesitated.
Well, because I think when we get to some of the other questions, you'll hear what I'm planning for my own future. It's a little bit outside of Forte dei Marmi, but I think I will always have a home there, and I will always call that home. And it's my son's home. He grew up there, so that will never go away.
And just like my last question on sort of the personal Italy thing, because you, like me, are raising your kid bicultural, I'm sure he's bilingual and he has dual citizenship and stuff. Well, what's his read of the situation now that he's in an age where he's like expressing himself? Does he want to stay here? He
wants to stay in Forte dei Marmi for the rest of his life. My biggest job right now is convincing him to go to university and get out for at least 4 years and work, because he can always come back.
Right.
But right now, because it is such a nice lifestyle and it's so wonderful for children, he just gets on his bike and goes into the center and comes back. He's completely independent. I'm just afraid that maybe it's too good of a life for him, and I need to get him out into the real world so he can come back and really appreciate it, because it's hard to appreciate something that you've had for your entire life.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I also think that, it's funny because even talking to my daughter who does want to leave Florence and go study, abroad and stuff, but she kind of wants to come back to Florence no matter what. So I think it's hard. These kids have grown up in very ideal situations.
Absolutely.
Very differently from probably how they would have been raised if we had raised them in the States. I get that, I get that. But I can talk to your son if you'd like. I did academic advising for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of options, to even, not even that far away necessarily, but to get that perspective and then be able to come back and, live his best life in Forte de Marme, if that's where it'll be.
If you can get through to him, that would be great.
I will try. I will do my best. I'll try. So if you're up to it, I think we could move on and talk a little more about what you do every day.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about you and your life up until now, I really am interested in talking more about your business, which has always fascinated me. I love what you do. And I want you to tell us more about it.
Great. I would love to, because most people still continue to ask me, what do you do? And those who think they know what I do really don't know what I do. The company is called Virtique, which stands for Virtual Boutique. We are bringing people to your business through digital experiences. So the concept is very much to see something before you go. And this makes sense across multiple sectors. The main use for the virtual reality is real estate, but it can be applied to anything.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about a restaurant, for example. What are the two things that you want to know before you go to a restaurant? What is the atmosphere? What does it look like? And what's the menu? I guess that's three things. If you can virtually enter and see that restaurant, it gives you a better idea of what the atmosphere is going to be like. It also allows you to do silly things like pick out the right shoes to wear. So what we're trying to do as a company, and what we are doing, is providing 4 services. One is the ability to view any physical place using virtual reality. And that can be done with the goggles or just simply through a smartphone or a computer. The second thing we're doing is allowing customers to try things through augmented reality.
Cool.
So that could be trying a couch in your apartment, a painting on the wall, or even glasses on your face. So we're taking people visually, like you're at a store, so you can view things, try them on.
Right.
And then adding on an e-commerce level that allows that instant gratification of having a digital experience where you can see, try, buy. And then ultimately we have a mapping service that puts everything on a map so you can find things. Any small business, medium business, is out there struggling now against the big guys with huge budgets. This is a solution that has 4 main products that are mixed differently depending on the sector and is basically agnostic, because these principles of see, try, buy, and find can be applied to almost any business.
Yeah.
Almost any business.
Yeah.
It's also something that's completely personalizable by our clients. So we create the base of the virtual experience, and then we teach our clients how to customize in real time, meaning they can take what we've created, the content, and add their logo, music, a voiceover, an avatar that talks about their business. They can basically connect any type of digital information, whether it be a menu, an architectural drawing, or even a video.
Yeah.
So it really allows people to have everything in one place, in one link. For me, it's the next generation of a website.
Yeah.
A lot of people have looked at this and said, well, why do I need a website? And the answer is, I don't know. Are a lot of people flocking to your website? Probably not. Probably not.
And honestly, like thinking about people don't have time anymore. People do not have time to waste. And so for me, like I think about my clients who want to buy property over here, or even recently I held a series of, 3 days of events. Those clients maybe had been able to see some venues in advance.
Absolutely.
And you say something like, a shoe choice, but when people have mobility issues, that's a big deal.
Absolutely.
And so being able to see in advance something like, oh, wait, this is a great venue, but I didn't realize that it had that, step
long
or
stairway
that, right,
or
it's on
gravel.
a really, or oh my gosh, who knew that they have this,
Well, that's the thing. It allows somebody to know what to expect, but also discover things that they didn't even know were there. And it allows the actual customer to highlight those things in such an immersive manner that sounds complicated, but it's super easy. And most of the projects we do are completed within a couple of hours and are ready the next day.
I understand. I've done it before. I've done your experiences before, both with the viewer and even just from my phone or from my laptop. So for me, it was pretty user-friendly. But I'm curious to know, what is the process? So can you tell me about, even something recent that you did or a project that you really liked and, talk us through
Absolutely.
All the steps?
I think the best project to talk about is one we recently did with a hotel in Forza de Marmi. It's called California Park Hotel. Beautiful hotel, 3 different buildings, 3 different pools, a separate villa, a restaurant, huge garden, and every room is completely different. Decorated differently. Every room has a balcony. So it's really a complicated thing to describe. What we did is we registered the entire hotel in virtual reality and allowed the customer to create their own menu by teaching them how to do it. For example, somebody calls and they're interested in what this room looks like. They can actually send a specific location of the virtual tour to that client.
Wow.
That client can then see where is that in proximity to maybe another building, where it is in proximity to the pool. It really allows the clients to have this preview where when they arrive, they're never going to be disappointed because it's exactly what they expected. We focus very much on using this as not only a marketing tool to show people or to sell, but to also reduce time that it takes for the staff to explain things.
Oh, it's just more efficient.
It's completely more efficient.
It's all streamlined.
Down to the woman who owns part of the hotel, and she is the decorator, saw it and said, oh, okay, now I can measure the size of the carpets. So yes, so if you want to redecorate, for example, you can go into your tour, you can go through the entire hotel and maybe say, I want to change that, I want to change this, and then you can send those pictures. Even, let's say you want to change gardeners. They can go there and they can see the actual garden.
It's unbelievable.
They can give you a quote. They don't have to come. They don't have to spend their time. And you can really create efficiencies, even down to something broken, the electrical box.
Right.
Well, here's where the electrical box is.
Do you know, it's unbelievable because I'm thinking, I had thought about it really as a consumer,
No, it's
and as somebody who does often look at venues for clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw it only through that lens. And now I see that there are all these advantages for the person who's commissioning the work. It's unbelievable.
Let me walk you through something that I think is just so important to understand about it. And let's just talk about real estate for a second.
Let's do it.
So a building, a new construction, starts at 0, gets built up. Then there's walls, then there's tubes, then there's wires, then they get covered. Who knows if they're actually in the place that's on the blueprint. Then another company comes in, puts the finishing touches on it, maybe changes something. The house gets sold. Okay, the owner moves in. You want to hang a painting. You put a hole in the wall, boom, a pipe breaks. Because you don't know where everything is. Right. So this is called the golden thread, which is the process from the very beginning of any construction to the very end to have not only the documentation visually, but the type of technology we use also has technical data that allows extrapolation of the data. It's measured. So it creates files that architects can use. And the owner has a manual of every phase of the development. Now, isn't it crazy that in order to get insurance for your car, you have to have the libretto that has the entire service history, everything that happened down to the end to get the insurance?
Right.
Let's say you're going to buy a car. There's 2 cars. They're exactly the same color, same mileage. One has the libretto with the entire service history and everything, and the other doesn't. Which one do you buy?
Obviously, the one with the history.
Okay. So this asset of a car is so much lower in value than a home.
Right.
Yet the home doesn't have that process. What we do is something that's visual, but it's also technical, and it allows every phase of construction, all the way from the beginning to the owner. And when I say construction, it doesn't have to be a new construction.
Sure.
It could be a renovation.
Yeah.
And it allows everybody to have accurate information of history and also the reality of the situation. Then it allows that person to sell the house more efficiently.
Right.
It goes through the entire cycle. And this is not just with a home. It could be with a storefront. It could be with a restaurant.
Sure.
So the same principle is for any built space. That's where we're trying to educate the market to really understand what the value is. Because a lot of people just say, oh, it's pretty.
Yeah. And I think I'm glad you really explained it, because it does have so many purposes for somebody who's investing in this. And it's sort of the gift that keeps on giving. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, if you have that with your house, like think about how many houses you've bought and you have no idea, right?
Just
you have no idea. Right?
You don't know what's behind the walls. You don't know how it happened.
Idea. And so having that blueprint, that like technical and technological history of a space is fundamental.
It really
is phenomenal. So I'm curious, because, you know, people think of Italy and people do not think of technology at all. And you're working in a highly technological field. How's that been?
Not easy.
Yeah.
Not easy. It's a challenge. Most of my time is spent educating people about how they can use this. As you know, there's a lot of traditional ways to do things, and there are a lot of people very much set in their ways. However, I've always been working in an industry of change.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, it's easier to decide between two options, but it's harder to decide to change the way you're doing something today. I focus a lot on allowing people to try things. A lot of times I will offer kind of like a snapshot of something, and this is how you can use it. But I'm focusing a lot on educating people, on showing them how they can use it. I can guarantee you, once someone starts to use it and they know how to use it, it's hard to live without it. It's really just getting that person to accept change. And unfortunately, not everybody has that flexibility.
No.
But the people who do will profit from it, and they will be more successful in the future. Just with any technology, it's exactly the same. Early adopters will have an advantage.
Right. And I think right now, if I think about people sort of in general, like we all embrace technology, if you will, but there are certain things that scare people off a lot still. And I think especially in a country like Italy, where human interactions are still so privileged over virtual interactions, I think people might have a little resistance to it. But at the same time, I see so many benefits from a business person's point of view, but also because I think you have something extra that not a lot of people have who live here. You have a really deep understanding of the culture. You know how to talk to people, which is like a big deal here in Italy. You've bought and sold properties. So that sort of your know-how begins with that. Well, what do I wish I had had? Or, right?
Absolutely.
Is that what it comes from?
It does. Well, that's how I started the company. That's what I wanted, because I broke my leg. Well, let's just say I had a dog treat business and I got attacked by dogs, not because of the treats, and I broke my leg. And what I wanted was to go shopping. And I couldn't. I was completely immobile. I was sick of looking at e-commerce and web pages. I wanted to browse. I wanted to look, and I wanted to feel like I was there. And that is exactly how I started the company, with that in mind.
That's amazing.
But I want to go back to the human interaction, because I am not for this concept of metaverse at all. I am not for people sitting behind a computer and not living their lives. I am for stuzzicare, to entice people to go in person.
Yeah.
And that is the whole thing about my business. I'm not saying, oh, somebody can just go visit virtually and that's it. However, there are people that can't, because of economic reasons or mobility reasons.
Yeah.
So why not give them the opportunity?
Yeah.
There's also educational purposes. I mean, we do things for schools, but think about if you're in a classroom and you're learning about art, wouldn't it be better to have an immersive experience in an art gallery?
Yeah.
To really appreciate what's going on. Plus, the kids are going to like it more because they get to use their phones. There's a lot of things that I need to clarify, because people, when they hear virtual, they think, no, I'm going to lose that. No, the point is you're giving a service to your clients.
Yeah.
You're allowing them to see things before they buy them, to save their time, because maybe somebody wants to go and look at 20 event locations, but at the end of the day, you don't have time to take them to all of those. The people that are then spending time showing the event, 1 out of 20 people who come actually book it. So everybody's actually kind of wasting their time.
No, this is a win-win for everybody. You know, from a business point of view, for sure. But also, I think you raise an important point, which is the social factor, mobility, economics. I love the idea of, education, which is always, I see as this sort of this thing that should not have limits or borders and should be accessible to everybody. And so I love the fact that your company really encompasses all of these things. It seems just like, as I said, a win-win for both a consumer, but also for somebody who's trying to get their business or whatever out there.
I think so too. My goal is to allow people to have access to technology, use it, and pay the right price on a subscription base instead of just asking for someone for an absorbent amount of money. Then they do it once, they never use it, they don't see the value. To build value, you really have to do things, I believe, for affordable and accessible prices.
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. I enjoy it. And I love to see the results. And to date, we have done more than 2,000 projects, which is a lot. It's only been a couple of years. And it's really only started to take off this year without me always having to actively sell. This summer, it's actually 3 summers that we're doing this, we have quite a nice agreement with a very high-profile wedding platform.
Wonderful.
So every day we're out doing virtual tours. Yesterday we were on the beach in Grosseto. Next week we're at a castle. It's basically all over the place between agriturismo, castles, villas, hotels. It's not bad.
Congratulations.
We enjoy it. Thank you. And to see a result immediately after is also very, very satisfying for our customers as well.
Absolutely. So it would be silly of me not to ask the obvious question, because it's all people talk about, is AI. How has that affected your work? How is it affecting your work?
Well, it's making me more efficient, that's
Obviously,
for sure.
Yeah.
But let me just give you a big picture view of how it ties into the business that I do. Think about the future. And when I say future, I'm not talking about 10 years. I'm talking about almost now. There is the capability to use AI to look at all of the virtual tours. Right now, once I complete a virtual tour, I can actually ask for a summary and it will tell me how many bedrooms, square meters, how high the ceilings are. And where that's going to go is a platform where you can ask questions. Here's a project that I'm proposing, and I hope it goes to Bonfine, to the end. A town like mine that has hundreds of restaurants, hundreds of stores, thousands of houses for rent, 30 hotels, 70 beach clubs. How do you choose? If all of these things are captured virtually, you could have a very simple program on top where you ask a question. I'm looking for a beach club that has a restaurant that serves spaghetti arcelle on Tuesday at 3 p.m.
And
it tells you
Melissa,
what's open, where it is, and gives you a virtual tour.
I need this.
I am looking for a 4-star hotel with a view of the beach, with a pool at this price range.
It makes everyone's life so much easier.
It makes everyone's life so much easier. It is like Google on steroids. Yeah. AI is enabling that to happen because it's looking through all of these tours and finding the information and only giving you
what you need, what you want, what you ask for. It's brilliant. So you're already, AI is sort of the icing on the cake for your job.
It's already integrated into what we do. And that being said, it's very easy to take that to the next step to make it something interactive and useful for any type of consumer of any type of product.
I love this. I also just from the lens of tourism, there's so much out there.
I didn't have a clue until I started this business because I don't want to say stuck in Forte dei Marmi, but that's where I was.
You were stuck.
Once I started getting projects all over Italy, wow.
Right.
I mean, wow. There are beautiful things everywhere.
But you don't know where to start.
You don't know about it.
It's overwhelming. And so also I see a lot of value in you're bringing places to people that maybe are a little more off the beaten path.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can help people discover those places that really should be discovered.
So if you can pre-plan, you might stay for longer. You'll probably spend more money because you're not trying to figure out what to do. You're enjoying it.
You'll be less frustrated because I think a lot of what, we hear is that people, especially Americans, we have limited vacation time. We don't know. You read stuff. Who do you trust?
Nobody.
Nobody. Right?
Not Instagram.
No, not people are telling you things because they're getting paid for it or who knows what kind of kickbacks they're getting. You're showing people the reality.
Absolutely.
And you're doing it in a way that is incredibly beneficial to both, as I said, the consumer and the person who's offering whatever service it is.
Thank you, Fosca.
Grazie mille.
Grazie a te.
E alla prossima volta.
Ciao.
Ciao.